Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit about how most lifters, many lifters, think that they need way more training volume than they actually need. And it's just something I've observed coaching people. And I mean, a perfect example would be I have several clients who, when I take their volume down and they're doing less volume than they're used to for certain muscle groups, they become convinced that they are actually shrinking. And this is how much people have bought into the really high volume thing. You know, in spite of the fact that the majority of the data shows that going over 10 sets in a training session usually produces less muscle growth. 10 sets for the same muscle, right? We have multiple studies that have looked at that and found that when they have groups of people who do 15 or 20 sets for a muscle group in one session, that they gain less muscle than the people who do 5 or 10 sets. They gain less muscle. And these are oftentimes intermediate to advanced lifters. This is not just novices. They gain less, right? Furthermore, and this is kind of funny. A perfect example. Antonio is one of my lifters who does this a lot. And some of you guys have seen his vlogs. He's got his own blog, his own channel. He is always convinced that he's losing muscle. Like if I take away some of the smaller movements for biceps or hamstrings or whatever, he's like, my hamstrings are getting smaller. But then, you look at him and go, does your good mornings go down? Right? It's like, no, my good mornings are stronger. Well, then how could your hamstrings have gotten smaller? It's not even possible. But it's because people have been convinced, largely by a lot of people online, people who are telling people to do, 20 plus sets, 5, 6 days a week total, and have people doing 30, 40 sets per muscle group sometimes when you start adding it up, that this has become the norm in many people's eyes. They think they're supposed to come in and just do huge amounts of pump work. Evidence doesn't support this for muscle growth. And here's the other thing. You get people who are convinced of this, and I don't want anyone to think I'm singling him out. He's actually just someone that you guys would know the name of. Another lifter who has done the same thing in the past would be, you guys remember the guy in my training collage who did the Zercher squat from the floor with 455? He does the same thing. So he's also one of my lifters who does that, who's convinced he has muscles that are shrinking because we're not doing 20 sets a week for that muscle. And because he used to do a lot more volume. But it's like, you look at him and go, well, how much weight have we put on your squat and deadlift and bench press? Right? Because I've coached that particular lifter at least a year and a half. And in that time, he's gone from like a 500 deadlift to a 560. We've gone from like a 400 squat to a 460 squat. Right? He was a sub 300 bencher. He can bench 300 now. And, he's doing that while weighing 185 pounds. He hasn't even gained weight since I've had him. He's recomped a little bit. And the guy's pretty lean. He's probably 10% body fat. But, he'll do the same thing. That, well, the muscles are shrinking. But then if you show people data, it's like if any of you people out there look at the studies, and this would go to a lot of you out there, a lot of lifters do this. They feel that they're shrinking. If they are only doing, 5 or 6 sets for a muscle per week, that it must be shrinking. It's not what the research shows. The research shows, if I recall, that it takes somewhere between 1/5 to 1/6 of the volume to retain a muscle that you use to build it. In other words, if you used 15 sets per week to build a muscle, that was what you did, spread out hopefully over a couple sessions, that as few as 3 sets a week for that same muscle will retain, if they're hard sets, challenging sets, right? 3 sets a week will maintain your muscle. It will not atrophy. It may not make progress, right? Because it's kind of hard to grow in 3 sets a week, but it'll stay the same size. It will stay the same size. It will not get smaller. It won't get smaller. This is what the data shows. You can maintain on that. So what does that tell a lot of you out there if you need to do a bit of a maintenance phase? Let's say that you just can't train the way you've been training and you want to keep what you have. You could do 3 to 5 sets a week for your muscles and keep everything. And this includes advanced lifters. Now, will you progress? No, you probably won't make any progress. Pretty unlikely. But if you came in and did 3 hard sets per week for each muscle, you'll maintain your size. You'll keep it. Again, one of the things that we do when people go into a deficit, we reduce volume, right? Most good coaches do that. Every good coach that I know out there does that. When people go into a deficit, they slightly reduce volume. Why? We're just trying to retain muscle. We're not trying to push you beyond your limits. You can't recover. Pretty common. Again, barring some exceptions. There can be exceptions to this, because some people might actually be trying to gain, particularly enhanced lifters. Might run a little more volume and push those limits because they're trying to make progress. But a lot of people, particularly drug-free lifters, they're just trying to keep the muscle they have. You don't need as much workload to do that, right? You just need to bring their calories down, bring their protein up. So all in all, the problem is people think they need more volume than they do. And I'm going to be honest, this is where guys like Mike Israetel and Brad Schoenfeld are not helping, because the things that they are pointing out are in disagreement with the majority of the experts. Right over here talking about 45 sets for legs in a week. That's crazy. Or even talking about going to 30 sets a week, at the most extreme for a muscle group. It's not necessary. You're not going to gain more from doing that. The data is pretty consistent there, right? Data is pretty consistent. We don't usually see more muscle growth by training a muscle more than twice a week. On average, usually we don't. There are some exceptions. But the majority of the time in your data, you don't see that. We don't see people gaining additional muscle by exceeding 10 sets per week for a muscle. You really don't see it. 10 sets per training session. So where does that leave us? We're right back to that optimal zone. What is that optimal zone? Is to do 10 to 20 hard sets per week per muscle group. Again, considering that some exercises will count as a half set. Some of your multi-joint movements really will only be a half set for some of the muscles involved, right? Like bench press, probably half sets for triceps. It's a full set for your pecs. It's a full set for your anterior delts. You can count a lot of those things as half sets for the medial delt. Rowing, you're pressing. Half sets for triceps. Half sets for biceps, unless it's something like a chin-up. Chin-up is a full set for bicep. Probably, based upon the research, a chin-up is probably equal, if not superior, to any form of curl for your bicep. And so on and so forth. But when you look at it in that context, we don't get a benefit from going beyond 10 sets in a training session if they're hard, high-quality sets, taken close to failure. It just doesn't occur, right? Unless you're doing junk volume, you're doing suboptimal sets, which we have reasons to do sometimes. There's a place for that. Maybe you're deadlifting and stuff, right? Taking deadlift sets too close to failure will bury you, right? That's an exception. So we're back at that point of 5 at the lowest end, up to about 10 sets per training session, each muscle hit twice a week. Generally, again, a 4-day upper lower does this very effectively. Means we're not really growing from beyond 20 sets per week. And we can grow off of 10. We can absolutely grow off 10 sets for a muscle per week. The literature confirms this repeatedly. We can get very good hypertrophy off that. It's not a problem. Not everyone even needs to go up to 20 to maximize growth. You might need it for some muscles. Others you won't need it all. You'll have muscles where 10 to 12 sets per week can give you maximum hypertrophy if they are high quality sets. You just do not need as much volume as people think they do. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.